The 2010s. Is there a name for this decade? I'm not really sure, but let's just call it the 2010s. What's changed in audio in this decade? Some pretty obvious things, some pretty subtle things, but I got a list here and let's get through it. Well, the first thing is that two-channel audio is still around. And on the other side of the block, home theater / multi-channel audio, it's there, it's not gone, but it's certainly not gaining on anything, and I'd say it's probably down from where it was, mostly due to the fact that soundbars have replaced home theater systems for a lot of people. Not everyone, just a lot of people. Soundbar sales, which is not really my thing, but I'll just mention it in passing, are going up. So, but two-channel, audiophile oriented, listening to music, two-channel audio is alive and kicking, and it's not going away, that's for sure. So the most obvious change in this decade is streaming. That's the big news of this decade, right? That's what a lot of audiophiles have embraced fully, and they're streaming music on Tidal, and Qobuz, and MQA plays a role in that. So that's the big change. Now, in a way, linked to that, though, is high-res streaming, but there is more high-res music available now than there was 10 years ago. There's no doubt about that. My frustration with it is that those are just numbers, 9624 or 19224 or DSD, but the actual sound quality of, let's just say, mass-produced music from your favorite bands or performers, that hasn't gotten better. And if anything, it's gotten worse in these 10 years, that it's more compressed, and it's more processed than it was 10 years ago, than it was from 20 years ago to today. It's definitely not even holding steady. I would say the overall trend, with exceptions, is getting worse. So while there is more high-res music, the quality of the recording of a band like Wilco or whatever, that's not any better. In fact, it's generally worse. So yes, good news is we have more high-res. Bad news is the sound of most recorded music is down from where it was 10 years ago. And I think the reason for that mostly has to do with people making music and the engineers who are recording it and mixing and mastering it know that most people are not audiophiles, and most people are listening in noisy environments, in their car, on a bus, on a train, on a plane, and outside. So they're making their music sound good for those people who are listening, not in quiet places, because that's the way most people experience recorded music. So there you have it. Now, there are exceptions, many, and audiophile labels like Chesky Records and Reference Recording and Water Lily and MA Recording, one of my favorites. Yeah, their records are fantastic and have been and continue to be. But that's a very, very, very narrow slice. So this decade has not, overall I would say on balance, this decade has maybe even holding steady, not improving, and no, I'd say, I'm sorry, I was trying to be optimistic there. It's actually gotten worse in the 2010s. So the other big news of this decade is the supposed rise of active speakers for audiophiles. Now, active speakers, meaning speakers with built-in amplifiers or speakers with built-in digital signal processing, etc., they have always been a part of the pro market. But that's not what I'm talking about. In terms of audiophile-oriented active speakers from companies like Key or Meridian, which has been making active speakers for decades, and I guess KEF has gotten a little serious about it with their LS50. Active speakers keep being hinted at as like the next big thing, and yet they're not really the next big thing, because I have yet to see, let's just put it this way, an establishment audiophile-oriented high-end speaker company that makes passive speakers starting to introduce high-end, meaning let's say $5,000 and up, active speakers. And as for digital signal processing of music at home, yes, there are companies that are doing it more successfully than they used to. But again, it's on the periphery. It's just not really entered the mainstream of audiophile music listening. Home theater, multi-channel, yes, there's DSP going on there. But I don't see a lot of audiophiles drifting in that direction of multi-channel music only experiences. I don't think I've ever been in a store, maybe ever, well certainly in this decade, in this century, that has demoed multi-channel audio for music. Not to say it doesn't exist, just saying I've yet to see it being promoted by any dealers. And by the way, dealers like to make money, so selling more speakers and more cables, etc., wouldn't be something they would shy away from if they saw a need for it or market for it, right? So since no one's really ventured that way, I'm not seeing a lot of movement in multi-channel music reproduction for the home. In terms of drivers for speakers, again, it's flat. There is no new technology. There's different materials used in drivers, there's refinement there, but no big breakthroughs in driver, let's just say, technology in this decade of the 2010s. Probably the biggest change in this decade is the rise of audiophile-oriented, as meaning people who actually listen to music as opposed to having it on in the background, of affordable, sometimes downright cheap audio that is, it's real. That's a big difference. Companies like Shit, they are definitely in the vanguard. Emotiva, U-Turn Audio, they're making audiophile-oriented yet very affordable products. That didn't really exist before this decade. So that's something I'm really happy to see, because it brings in people who otherwise couldn't afford it or would have to buy used things. Now they can get new products that are definitely made for listening. Now, it's interesting that the CD is still in there. I still play CDs. I still support CDs. I still think CDs are a great format. But in terms of the audiophile audience and stuff, if you go to hi-fi shows, you'll see people playing records at hi-fi shows, and you'll certainly see people streaming at hi-fi shows, but not a lot of CD playback at audiophile shows. The whole interest in CDs among audiophiles in general is way, way down. And that is a change for this decade. I don't think the CD is going to disappear entirely, but I would say the big news of this decade is, if anything, the appeal, the audience for vinyl has gotten bigger. I've noticed this trend that in some stores in New York City, that if I see a 30-year-old customer in a store and I say, well, what do you listen to? I would say the majority, 3/4 of them, either listen to vinyl exclusively or they really have committed to vinyl in a big way. They don't play CDs, they stream. They either stream or play vinyl. But some people, I've met them many times now, who are just getting into audio in their late 20s and early 30s, some of them only play vinyl at home. But speaking of stores, this decade has not been kind to brick and mortar audio stores. They are definitely in the decline, and that is something I'm not happy to see. And even here in New York City, where we still have a bunch of high-end audio-oriented stores, many of them are by appointment only. They can't afford the rents to have a street visible store anymore. They're much smaller operations. And in many cities that you don't have a choice of high-end stores, you may not have any. So brick and mortar is in decline in this decade, and that is too bad. And the problem with that for audiophiles in general is, yes, you can buy things on the internet for less, and you've cut out a lot of the middleman profits, but it's much harder now to compare, speaker A versus speaker B versus speaker C, or amplifier A versus B, C, or E, because you're only really hearing them one at a time by buying them. So where before you could go to a store and actually get to hear things in comparison, was it the perfect way to demo? No. Did it sound like the way it would at home? No. But you got to hear them in the same place, comparing them to each other, and you would gain something from that. And now that is less and less possible in this decade, and that's a real problem, I say. But unfortunately, I don't see any way out of that right now. So brick and mortar is going away. If you have a brick and mortar store or two in your locality, you support them strongly. I really recommend that, because if you don't, they will disappear. I think this decade, probably the best part of this decade, has been the rise of audiophile-oriented YouTube channels, which I am a part of now. but I wouldn't have seen that coming 10 years ago. No way. I would never think that I would have a YouTube channel. But when I look at John Darko's channel, he's a leader there. I mean, he's very thorough. They're beautifully shot and edited, really, really impressive. My friend Sean over at Zero Fidelity, his stuff is incredible. He is an amazing person. We're friends, and the guy always is impressing me. I like Z Reviews. I think he's got great shtick. He's really, really funny. Zio said Z Reviews. Joe and Tell, DMS, this really young guy. I think he's really, really smart. So where before I would say, well, all audio writers, including myself, are really old people, where is the next generation of audio criticism or journalism coming from? And now I know where it's coming from. It's coming on YouTube. It's not in the magazines. It's not even on most websites, right? It's here on YouTube. And I'm really thankful for that, and I'm glad to straddle that that change where I came from print and from the internet with my 18 years at CNET to now be fully committed here on YouTube. So that's in some ways the biggest change and the most surprising change of this decade. Hey, my name's Steve Guttenberg. This is the Audiophiliac Daily Show. And before I get to the usual closing remarks, I want to give you a heads up that I'm going to be doing some Speaker of the Year episode coming up. There's actually going to be 3 Speakers of the Year for 2019. I'm also going to be doing the long-awaited roundup of recommended systems, this time for $2,500 for a complete system or less. And yeah, that's coming up real soon. But for now, I will say you can follow me on Twitter at AudiophiliacMan. You can follow me on Instagram at steve.guttenberg. And if you got this far, check out the Patreon at patreon.com/audiophiliac. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See you again real soon.